All right. So we're doing imperfect computation. And we recapped more or less what we learned in principles class on monopoly. And now we're going to get into some, we're going to start with a little familiar territory, and then we'll get into some uncharted territory. So game theory, we're going to spend more time in chapter 12 on, but this chapter kind of starts off with the prisoner's dilemma, which you might remember. So I'm going to kind of refresh your memory on some oligopoly. So we've got just a few firms acting strategically. We've got a differentiated or homogeneous good. And we've got some barriers to entry. So that sets the tone for these two firms, or a few firms. So we're going to start off today with a game, kind of get our juices flowing, and then we'll do more of this later. But let's take, good old Coke and Pepsi, and we're going to go with the high advertising budget or the low advertising budget. I'll try to ring a few bells for those of you who had me before, but I'm going to change the numbers around a little. So if both companies advertise or go with the high advertising budget, Coke earns $200 million and Pepsi earns $400 million. I'll just go ahead and put Coke and Pepsi up here. If they both go with the low advertising budget, Coke gets $300 million and Pepsi gets $500 million. If Pepsi goes high and Coke goes low and kind of cheaps out, Coke's going to lose out and only get $150 million, while Pepsi gets $550 million. And finally, if Coke goes high and Pepsi cheaps out, Coke gets $400 million and Pepsi gets $300 million. So let's see how good your memories are. First of all, Colby, does this ring a bell for you? This setup for your principles class from before? Did you guys? So does game theory ring a bell?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You probably, if you did game theory, you definitely did it. So, but you might not have set it up quite the same way. It could have been slightly different. So, but that's what I figured, and I think everybody needs a review here. So, what did we call this thing? Anybody remember? The whole kind of setup here, this little 4x4 with the stuff in the middle. I don't want to give it away what the stuff is called. There's a general name. It's called the payoff matrix. The payoff matrix. And this is also called, to be consistent with your book, it's called the strategic form of the game, and I think that's the lingo that the book uses too. Like I said, we're really going to get into this more in the next chapter.
Advertising day.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking ahead into chapter 12. So this is the normal form. It's also called strategic form, but so there's normal and extensive form. So this is called the payoff matrix, and you can also put on here that this is the normal form. The normal form. And we call it the payoff matrix because it shows the payoff from all possible permutations of choices that could be made. We've got the agents here, Coke and Pepsi. These are our economic agents. Each one of these agents is making some choices. So high and low advertising budget are the choices or strategies, kind of the strategy combinations. It's kind of weird when it's not a multi-step process, but we can think of these as choices or strategies for each of the agents. And inside the matrix, the first entry is always the agent to the left. So this is Coke's payoff. Coke's payoff. The second entry is always the agent up top, or the player to the right. That's why it's kind of left and right here. And that's Pepsi's payoff. We use the word payoff because it could be in terms of utility, it could be in terms of revenue, it could be in terms of budgets, it could be anything. So it's some sort of payoff of some sort. In this case, we might be thinking about profits for the two firms from the advertising. All right. So, what should each firm do? What's the optimal way? Where do you think this is going to end up? And when we play these games, it's important to know if we're playing as a simultaneous game or sequential game. So does Coke go first and then Pepsi? Or do they both choose at the same time without knowing the other one? So that's called a simultaneous game. Is this played a repeated number of times, or is it played just once? Right? So all those things could be factored in, and we will factor them into games. So let's say that this is a simultaneous one-shot game. Simultaneous. Both are going to choose at the same time. One shot. In other words, it's not repeated. A simultaneous one-shot game. Another thing is that Pepsi gets to see all this information that you're looking at. Coke gets to see all this information. But what they don't know is they don't know what the other one's going to choose. But they do know the payoffs associated with each one. So have you figured it out yet? What do you think is a good thing to do? Both going to choose high. Why?
Because the payoffs are greater if they choose high regardless of what the other one does.
Okay. So this game here, the way I've got it set up, is called the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma. And with the prisoner's dilemma, each agent has a dominant strategy that leaves each player or each agent with a payoff that is not optimal. So for a dominant strategy, you have to have a choice that makes you better off no matter what the other guy chooses. And so that's where this kind of plays out. So for Coke, if Pepsi chooses low, what would be the best choice for Coke? If Pepsi chooses low, what would be the best choice for Coke? To go high. Why? Because 400 is bigger than 300, right? So this is where we start to do a little eyeball training. If Pepsi goes high, what's the best choice? Still high, because 200 is greater than 150. So no matter what, Coke is better off going high. Now, for Pepsi, so actually let me write that out in kind of our shorthand lingo. So if Pepsi chooses low, then Coke should choose high. I should put a little then in here. If Pepsi chooses high, then Coke should choose high. Therefore, Coke has, or Pepsi has, therefore Coke has dominant strategy of choosing high. No matter what Pepsi does, Coke's better off choosing high. To check for Pepsi, we do the same exercise. If Coke goes high, Pepsi should. Now, if Coke goes high, what should Pepsi do? Go high. Why? Instead of 300. So when we do it for Pepsi, you can kind of ignore these numbers, but then you also got to remember which one's here. So there's one little trick that might help you do this that you can do on your paper even if you don't have colors, is if this is Pepsi, you could go and circle all the second payoffs because those are the relevant payoffs for Pepsi. Sometimes that helps train your eyeball of which one to look at. So whenever we're talking about Pepsi, we're always looking at the orange circles. So if Coke goes low, if Coke goes high, Pepsi should go high. If Coke goes low, Pepsi should go high because 550 is greater than 500. Right? So let's write that one out. If Coke goes low, since I did it low here, Pepsi will choose high. If Coke goes high, Pepsi will go high. Therefore, Pepsi has dominant strategy of high. So they're both going to go high. High is right here. I say that, oh, go ahead.
So Taylor said that before we wrote it all out like that, but how did you know by just looking?
Yeah, if you look at it, as you start to train your eyeballs, this takes a while, by the way, because you guys should practice this, and we're going to get a lot of practice in chapter 12. So this is just kind of a little intro to kind of motivate some of the other things that we'll get to in the chapter. But if you're Coke, 200 is greater than 150, 400 is greater than 300, boom, high's the one, right? So as you train your eyeballs, you can start to see this right away. You won't even have to work too hard at it. Same thing with Pepsi. If you focus in on the second payoffs, then 400 is greater than 300, 550 is greater than 500, boom, high. High, boom, there's the answer. But it takes a while to get yourself trained to do that. The other concept is Nash equilibrium. So a Nash equilibrium is a solution such that neither party wants to change their answer, taking as given what the other one has done. So is this stable? Would Pepsi like to change? No. Would Coke like to change? No. So this is called a Nash equilibrium, which we'll put a little N up in the upper right-hand corner. And so that's the dilemma of this game, is that both would be made better off if they both cheaped out, right? If they both cheaped out, then both would be better off down here. Coke would be getting 300, which is better than 200, and Pepsi would be getting 500, which is better than 400. But it's not stable. It's not stable because if we do that Nash equilibrium test, would Coke like to change? Yes, because 400 is greater than 300. Would Pepsi like to change? Yes. They both like to change, so it's not a stable equilibrium. So we end up at the solution value that's not the best one for both parties. Because in economics, a Pareto improvement would be, is it possible to make both parties better off without making one party worse off? Here, it's a no-brainer. Both parties could be made better off if they both go low, but we don't get there because of the setup of the game. What could possibly have a chance of working would be if both companies could collude, if they could work together. So the last thing that we could add to this bullet list here is that this would be a non-cooperative game, which is true for most of our businesses in the United States. We don't allow companies to price fix with each other. We don't allow them to work together. Why? Because we want them to compete, because it gives benefits to society. So under the conditions of this game, if it's a non-cooperative, one-shot, simultaneous game, that would be the expected solution. What we're going to explore now is, what if they are allowed to cooperate? Will they get here? Will this remain stable? You know, will this be ultimately where they end up if we have a cooperative game? Are contracts going to work, et cetera, et cetera? All right. I'm having a little bit of deja vu because in principles class we're doing this too. Did we talk about cartels in here? I don't think we did we? Okay, I did in principles class already, so I want to have that discussion again before we get into the problem that we'll work on. So to kind of roll off of this, the cooperative solution would be called a cartel. A cartel is a group of firms, and I might try to give you guys I got it open. I'll give you guys how the textbooks got it. Yeah, we'll leave it then. A group of firms, slightly different than the book, not quite. A group of firms coordinate and collectively act as a monopoly to gain monopoly profits. It's illegal, yes, in the United States, depending on the circumstances. I mean, you know, sometimes they have joint ventures with each other or whatever, but yes, to really do it as a monopoly, monopolies are just in general illegal unless they're regulated, so yes. Around the world, though, they're not. So you have OPEC that controls the world's supply of oil, and so we've got drug dealers that might have territories carved out that kind of work together. We saw in the Freakonomics video. And I'm going to draw 3 graphs side by side to kind of motivate this. So if we have firm alpha, alpha is one of our drug dealers, and beta is our other drug dealer firm. And these two are going to get together to act as a monopoly so that they're not competing away all the good drug profits from each other. So there's a demand for their, what's our drug today? Give me a drug, any drug. Meth. So we got the market demand for meth down here. And these two are going to act together on that. Alpha can produce meth, and their marginal cost curve looks like this. Beta's a little bit different. They're not necessarily identical. One guy might have access to cheaper labor or something in his territory, and so maybe cheaper materials or something. So beta's marginal cost curve. So anyway, they don't have to look identical. But the idea is that through both of them supplying meth to the market, we've got the sum of the marginal cost curves over here in the marketplace looking like that, where we're trying to treat these guys into production together. Here's the benefits of the monopoly. They face a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. They say that the market supply of meth needs to be QM. So this is the monopoly solution, by the way. They're going to charge the highest price people are willing and able to pay for meth. Anybody know what meth's going for? I won't hold you to it, but I know it's cheap. That's why people buy it, right? Do you know? I'm not going to, it's possible that you know it and you don't do it, so you're not going to incriminate yourself. I have no idea. $10 for a hit of it or something, or whatever. $40 for a good pipe full of it. I don't know. 10. Let's say it's 10. So they're going to hold the price up at 10. Now the drug dealers, though, can make it for 5, apparently, according to my numbers here. So the marginal cost and the additional revenue is at 5. And so how do they allocate out production or sales to each market that the drug dealers are operating in? So each one's going to produce, beta's going to produce this little quantity here of, 500 baggies of meth, crack pipes full of meth. Alpha's going to have 400. And so in the market, big Q is 900, because just like what we learned way back in chapter 2 or 3, the market supply curve is kind of what we're doing here, right? We're adding up the marginal cost at each level. So 400 from alpha, 500 from beta, we get 900 in the market. Now each one has a price. I'll use the green pen here for the $10. Here's where they start to fall apart, is that each one's going to be selling at $10 even though their marginal cost is 5. So they're both profiting off this, but the key is what's going on at the margin. What's the incentive at the margin? Would it be a good idea for alpha to crank out the 401st, then extra baggie of meth? Would that be a good idea for alpha? Is that profitable to do so? Yeah, because if we look at alpha's situation here, the 401st baggie, I'm going to move over here, cost alpha $5.80, but they're going to sell it for 10. right? So the effect might be very low on the supply. It might have hedged it down a little bit, right? So it might have came down a tiny bit, but pretty much negligible. So alpha has incentive to cheat on the agreement because the revenue generated by an extra baggie is greater than the cost. Well, beta is in the same position. An extra baggie cost less than what the expected price is, and so beta also has incentive to cheat. And so what we find is that both companies tend to cheat on these agreements, and cartels tend to fall apart. All right. So that's a different way of thinking about the cheating phenomenon here. So now we've got cheaters in both cases, right? So this isn't stable. This cooperative agreement shows incentive for each firm to cheat if there was an agreement. Here, back to the type of method we've been using all semester so far, we've got each firm with incentive to cheat. And so that's one of our predictions we make under a cartel setting, is that both companies are going to cheat. All right, questions or comments on that? The last thing I want to leave you with from this, just because it's all up here, is that this is exactly the model that we have for a multi-plant firm. So if you are Toyota and you have a plant in Kentucky and a plant in California, where do I make the next Prius at? Do I make it in Kentucky or do I make it in California? Well, I'm selling Priuses all around the United States. How do I allocate production out? I'm going to allocate it out to the company with the least costs at the margin. So if all of a sudden the California workers are striking and new legislation from the California state government said that minimum wage is going to go from $7 to $20 or something, not that a car manufacturer would have minimum wage workers, but roll with me here. If there's some sort of policy that causes wages to go up, then that would cause this marginal cost curve to shift up and make it less likely that we're going to build Priuses in California. We're going to start making them in Kentucky. So that's how we'd allocate out production. Now, is there incentive to cheat? No, because it truly is one firm. It's not two firms competing with each other. So under that setup, there's still this profit measure, but it's all going into one pot. So we really don't have two firms, we have just one firm. But the model's the same. Okay, so any last questions there? Yeah.
Okay, so like in a major corporation, if a cartel were to form or something like that, then they would have economists that look at this stuff. I mean, like in retrospect, as a drug cartel, they're probably not going to have someone sitting down looking at this stuff.
You'd be surprised. They might. They've got enough money to do a side thing, and they might even be able to somehow fund some research that makes it look like it's for some academic purpose, and the economist who's the academic that's studying it doesn't know that the money's actually being funded through laundry system here through a drug cartel. I could dream up something like that, I suppose. I don't know if it really goes on, but if a drug cartel has its fingers into some sort of private organization in the United States, and so the private organization is the one that hires the academic economists to do the research, but then whoever the two dirty players are between the drug cartel and the person in this organization kind of funnels the research to the drug cartel. So it's possible.
So without knowing, like without looking at the market and looking at the demand and all that, there's no way that the market would like just fix itself in the long run? If they didn't look at it and have
And let me back up a second. So would the market would a cartel situation fix itself? Is that part of what you're asking? Yeah, a lot of economists would argue yes, because of the cheating thing. So what they find is that a lot of these cartel arrangements just fall apart naturally on their own, because each one cheats, and then possibly what happens is this guy, especially in the drug situation, this guy finds out this guy's cheating, and it's a drug war and a big gun battle, and maybe there's only one firm left at the end of the day. But then there's another firm looking to enter in on his turf or whatever. And so anyway, there ends up being maybe some healthy competition, but involves death and other things. So yeah. Okay. See, economists our economic models can be applied to some crazy stuff too. All right. Any other questions or comments? So let's take a look at this first problem. So we've got Squeaky Clean and Biobase are the only two producers of chlorine for swimming pools. You got yours? All right. The inverse market demand curve for chlorine is that function, 32 minus 2Q. And Q is measured in tons, P is in dollars. Assume that chlorine can be produced by either firm at a constant marginal cost of 16 and there are no fixed costs. If the two firms collude and act like a monopoly, agreeing to split evenly split the market, how much will each firm produce and what will the price of a ton of chlorine be? How much will the profit will be for each firm? So we're going to treat them like a monopoly. That's the first one. So this should be back to chapter 9 stuff. So what's the marginal revenue curve? All right, we got the 4Q, 32 minus 4Q, equal to the 16. How much is each firm making? What do we get? 4, good. What's the price? 24. All right, so we shove that back into not this function, of course, right? We find the price at 32 minus 2Q. 2 times 4 is 8, gives us a price of $24. And then what do we got for profit? Like that. What you guys get here? 32. Okay, be careful with the quantities. So how much is being produced? So we got the inverse market demand curve is this. So we get 32 here. Is that the profit for one firm or two? 2. So what is it for each firm? 16. We can better than assume it. At the in the problem, it said they're going to evenly split.
Oh.
So that's where we get the evenly split part. So profit equals $16 each. All right, now you could have done that a little bit differently too. We could have had the numbers up top with the $2. All right, what time is it here? About time to go. Let's just look at the next one. Does Squeaky Clean have an incentive to cheat on this agreement by producing an additional ton of chlorine? So is there an incentive to cheat? Think about this, and then think about your answer.
Yeah, I guess marginal cost is constant.
Okay, marginal cost is constant. We've got that price being higher. All right, so that's what we'll pick up next time. But we're gonna look at that a little bit more carefully as we work through the problem.